Hello everyone, my name is Maria, and today I would like to discuss the hidden effects of social media on mental health. Imagine waking up, grabbing your phone, and checking your socials before you even step out of bed. This is an everyday routine for many of us. Social media has become part of our daily routines. As we scroll, like, comment, and post, we don't realize how deeply social media affects our emotional well-being. So today, I'll be talking about the three ways social media influences mental health, which would be emotional comparison, neurological dependence, and sleep disruption. This topic is important because social media affects how we feel, think, and behave every single day. In order to make the right choice that protects our mental health, we first have to understand the impact social media has. So first, I'll start with how social media encourages emotional comparison, which can lower self-esteem and increase anxiety. Next, I'll explain how social media affects the brain, creating a neurological dependence, making it harder to disconnect. Finally, I will describe how late night scrolling can disrupt sleep. So let's begin with emotional comparison. Social media only shows what will look pleasing to the viewers. That's the only way to grab your attention. So you're constantly seeing people's perfect looking lives, achievements, and their luxury lifestyle. For instance, when someone posts a photo of themselves, it will always be with their best angles, or even edited, versus someone else posting a picture with that same person just from a different angle, she or he will look completely different. Studies show this only affects your self-esteem because you start to compare yourself to what you see on social media. This happens every time you open your socials. But remember, social media will only show the good and never the bad. We've learned how comparing ourselves to others can lower our self-esteem. Social media doesn't just influence our feelings, it also rewires our brain, creating a reward system and dopamine. Liking, commenting, sharing, and even hearing notifications triggers dopamine to be released to the brain. This is the same dopamine as addiction. You start to create pleasure from checking your socials, which creates a bad habit. Next thing you know, you've created a cycle where you feel the crave to be online. Instead of choosing to check your socials, it becomes something you feel obligated to do. You're literally stuck in a dopamine loop, which an example of a dopamine loop, sorry about that, would be right here. You go on social media, you then perform an action, you're gonna wait for a reaction, and then that reaction will then give you a reward. That is you being stuck in a dopamine loop because you're constantly waiting for that reward. But hey, social media companies are designed this way on purpose. While the brain while the brain becomes more dependent on social media, the effects don't just stop here. This dependence follows us through the night, disrupting our sleep. Most of us scroll through social media late at night thinking it will help us sleep. But the complete opposite happens. The only thing it's doing is keeping the brain mentally stimulated. Also, by scrolling before bed, you increase your alertness instead of allowing the brain to wind down. For instance, that blue light from the screen, it reduces the amount of melatonin our body makes, which is obviously going to make it harder to fall asleep. That same blue light also tricks the brain into thinking it's daytime, which isn't going to make it easier to fall asleep. Now let's be honest. How many of us get excited, stressed, or even anxious when you hear a notification, message, or see a trending post? I'm sure most of us do. Social media is meant to keep us engaged. Now, I am not saying social media is entirely bad and you should stay away from it, but to be able to understand how it influences us so we can use it more intentionally. With that being said, today we learned about how social media can affect our mental health in ways we don't always notice. First, we talked about how constant comparison can affect our confidence and increase anxiety. Then we learned how social media affects the brain, causing us to depend more on our phones. Now, finally, we talked about late night scrolling and how it interferes with our sleep. Now, we can't change the way social media works, but we sure can change how we let it affect us.